She thought he was just a peasant. Then he took hold of the blade. Kale had always been small in the eyes of the people around him, though not in a way that mattered to him. He worked in the lowest levels of the citadel, in the sprawling labyrinth of maintenance corridors and engine rooms. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy, and almost everyone considered them weak, fragile creatures, unworthy of attention or respect. Kale had learned long ago that drawing attention could bring trouble, so he kept his head down, worked hard, and said little. The citadel was a massive structure, hovering above a gas giant that shimmered in shades of green and blue. It was home to the ruling alien families of the Empire, a civilization older than most humans could imagine. Its walls were made of shining metal that seemed alive, etched with symbols of power and history. The corridors echoed with the sounds of machinery and footsteps, and the air smelled faintly of ozone and oil. In this world, every corner whispered stories of might and ambition. Kale's day had begun like any other. He moved through the corridors with a cart of tools, checking engines and tightening panels. His life was simple, but he took pride in it. Every bolt he tightened, every wire he repaired, kept the citadel running. Without him, the structures above would falter, though no one would ever notice his contribution. It was a lonely satisfaction, but Kale preferred it that way. Today, however, something felt different. There was a tension in the air that he could not name. A group of alien soldiers marched past, their armor clinking, their faces hidden behind polished helmets. They spoke in sharp, commanding tones that echoed through the corridors. Kale felt a shiver, not from fear but from anticipation. Change was coming, he could feel it. It arrived later that afternoon. The doors to the central hall opened, and a noblewoman stepped in. Lady Zyra was tall, with skin that shimmered faintly under the lights and eyes sharp as knives. She was known across the Empire, not just for her skill in combat, but for her ruthless pride. She moved with the confidence of someone who had never faced defeat, and her presence silenced the room. Even the guards straightened, their helmets gleaming, though their eyes betrayed a hint of awe. Kale watched her from the shadows. He had seen noble aliens before, and they always looked the same, untouchable, untiring, unstoppable. He kept his distance, knowing any interaction could end poorly. Yet he could not help noticing the way she examined everything around her, from the statues etched with the Empire's history to the floating weapons in their display cases. Her gaze was sharp, intelligent, and piercing, as though she could see through walls and into the hearts of those who passed by. When she reached the ceremonial weapons chamber, Kale was there as part of his routine inspection of the lower levels. He had not intended to see her, but the hallway led him directly to the edge of the chamber. His eyes were drawn to the displays of ancient blades and relics, each one glowing faintly with energy that humans could barely understand. He reached out just a little to touch the glass protecting one of the weapons. Lady Zyra noticed immediately. Her sharp eyes locked onto him, and she moved closer with the grace of a predator. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the room. "A human peasant trying to touch a blade reserved for warriors." Kale froze. He did not speak at first. It was not fear that held him, but the instinct to remain unnoticed. He gave a small, respectful bow. "I meant no harm, Lady Zyra," he said quietly. "I was just checking the corridors." The noblewoman's laugh was cold, almost cruel. "Checking the corridors? You dare call this work? You do not belong here. Humans have no place near weapons of honor." She stepped closer, her gaze sweeping over him as if weighing his worth. "Step back, peasant, before I decide to remove you myself." Kale stepped back, lowering his hands, but he did not look away. There was a calmness in him that surprised even himself. He had learned long ago that fear rarely solved anything. Sometimes it was better to stand quietly and wait. Lady Zyra's eyes narrowed, sensing a hint of defiance she did not expect. She had seen many creatures cower before her presence, but not him, not this human. As the tension grew, alarms suddenly echoed through the citadel. Red lights flashed along the walls, and a low hum began to vibrate through the floors. The nobles and guards moved quickly, their trained instincts kicking in. Kale felt the vibrations in his hands and feet. Something powerful was happening. The relics in the chamber pulsed, their glow intensifying, and the energy seemed to fill the room. The nobles hurried to the ceremonial platform at the center of the hall. Suspended above it was the ancient blade, floating without visible support. It was said that this weapon could judge the worth of any being who touched it. Many had tried, few had succeeded. Some had been thrown back by the force of the weapon, others had been struck unconscious. The blade's energy pulsed like a heartbeat, waiting for the right person. Lady Zyra moved forward with her soldiers, confident she would be chosen. She reached out, and the weapon responded with a flash of energy that pushed her back slightly. She steadied herself, anger flashing in her eyes. "Impossible," she whispered. She tried again, stronger this time, and the blade rejected her once more. The nobles gasped, murmuring among themselves. No one had ever resisted her claim. Kale stood at the edge of the hall, watching in silence. He felt no fear, only curiosity. The energy from the weapon resonated faintly with him, not in a way he could explain, but in a way that felt familiar. The humans had always been resilient, he thought. That quiet endurance, the ability to keep going when others faltered, was something no noble could understand. A guard noticed him moving forward. "Stop! You are not permitted here!" the alien shouted, raising a weapon. Kale did not stop. He moved carefully, step by step, his eyes fixed on the blade. Laughter erupted from some of the nobles. "A human dares approach." "This is entertainment," one of them jeered. Lady Zyra's face turned pale with anger. She shouted, "Halt him! How dare you challenge me, a warrior of the Empire?" Kale ignored them. Every step felt heavier as the energy from the blade increased. It seemed to pulse in time with his own heartbeat. He could feel its presence, not as a weapon of destruction, but as a force seeking someone who would carry responsibility without pride. He reached the platform, and all eyes were on him. The nobles whispered and muttered, some shocked, some amused. Lady Zyra's eyes burned with disbelief and fury. Kale extended his hand. The room fell silent, as though the universe itself was holding its breath. The blade responded differently this time. It did not reject him. It did not push him back. Instead, it seemed to wait, adjusting, sensing, measuring. Slowly, almost gently, it descended into his grasp. The energy that had filled the hall seemed to center on him, and the glow of the blade dimmed to a calm light. Gasps filled the room. Some nobles fell to their knees, muttering prayers. Lady Zyra's mouth opened in shock. "Impossible," she said again, louder this time. "A human? How?" Kale held the blade steadily. He did not feel power, he felt responsibility. The energy from the weapon flowed through him, not to dominate, but to guide. Memories of his life, of long hours of work, of protecting others in small ways, echoed faintly in his mind. The blade recognized not strength or lineage, but endurance, sacrifice, and the quiet courage to carry burdens without complaint. The chamber remained frozen in astonishment. No one spoke for several moments. Kale's calm presence contrasted sharply with the chaos around him. Lady Zyra's pride struggled to maintain itself, but even she could not ignore the truth. The blade had chosen him, a human, over every noble, every warrior, every being who thought themselves worthy. A low hum filled the hall. It was not threatening, but inviting, as if the blade itself was acknowledging Kale's presence. He felt a connection that he could not explain. The weapon was ancient, more than 1,000 years old, and yet it seemed to recognize him, to trust him. The nobles whispered, afraid to speak too loudly. Lady Zyra's anger simmered beneath the surface, but she could not deny what had happened. Kale took a deep breath, lowering the blade slightly. He understood something profound in that moment. True strength was not about pride, status, or power. It was about enduring hardships, helping others, and acting with calm and purpose. Humans, though underestimated, had this in abundance. That quiet strength, unnoticed by most, was what made them dangerous in a galaxy built on arrogance and fear. The first part of the story ended with Kale standing on the platform, holding the blade. The nobles stared, unsure what to do next. Lady Zyra's eyes never left him, a mixture of disbelief, awe, and something she had never felt before, respect. Kale did not ask for recognition or reward. He only understood that the world had just shifted, that humans were capable of far more than anyone had imagined. And somewhere deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. The chamber was silent for several moments after Kale grasped the blade. Nobles whispered among themselves, their voices a mixture of disbelief and fear. Lady Zyra stood frozen, her mind racing. How could a human, weak, fragile, and untested, be chosen over the strongest warriors of the Empire? It made no sense according to everything she had ever known. Yet there was the proof, glowing faintly in Kale's hands. The low hum of the blade filled the hall, almost like a heartbeat. Kale could feel it pulsing, steady and calm, in rhythm with his own pulse. He did not understand how it worked, but he felt a strange clarity. The weapon seemed to recognize him, not for his lineage, his strength, or his skill, but for the quiet endurance he had carried his entire life. Every hour spent laboring, every small act of protection for others, every choice to remain humble and patient, these were the qualities the blade sought. A guard, uncertain and fearful, stepped forward. Human stepped back. "You are not permitted to touch the blade?" His voice was firm, but the tremor in it betrayed his fear. Cale did not move. He only lowered his gaze slightly, careful not to appear threatening. The guard looked at Lady Zyra for support, but even she hesitated. The blade had already judged the human. Resistance now felt meaningless. Suddenly, a sharp vibration ran through the floor. The citadel shuddered and alarms began ringing louder. A distant section of the structure flashed red, signaling that something had breached the outer perimeter. Sensors detected multiple unidentified ships approaching at high speed. The nobles' murmurs grew frantic. "How could they arrive undetected?" one asked, voice trembling. "Our shields, they should have been seen." Lady Zyra's composure returned in a flash. She stepped forward, her voice commanding. "Everyone to their stations, prepare the defenses." Soldiers moved quickly, their training impeccable. Yet there was a tension Cale had never felt before. This was not just a drill. This was real. Something powerful and dangerous had arrived, and the citadel was the target. Cale felt the blade's hum intensify. It resonated not with aggression, but with warning. The energy flowed into him, filling him with a sense of responsibility he had never expected. The relic did not ask him to fight. It asked him to act, to think, and to guide. He had no combat training, no knowledge of tactics beyond what he had seen as a laborer, yet he sensed what needed to be done. Lady Zyra moved to intercept him. "Step aside, human. You will endanger yourself." "This is not your fight." Her voice was sharp, but Cale only shook his head. "I don't need to fight. I need to help guide them," he said calmly. The soldiers looked at him in surprise, uncertain whether to obey him or the noble. The tension was palpable. The first wave of enemy ships emerged from the dark edge of space. They were sleek, black, and fast, designed for attack and infiltration. The citadel's shields flared as energy weapons struck, sending waves of light and heat across the walls. Explosions echoed in distant halls, shaking the floors beneath Cale's feet. He could feel the hum of the blade intensify with each strike, almost as if it was measuring the stress, the fear, and the endurance of everyone in the citadel. Cale took a deep breath and moved toward the command center. He did not run. He walked steadily, letting the blade guide him. Inside, he found the room filled with nobles and officers, their faces pale, their eyes wide with fear. Lady Zyra blocked the central console, arms crossed, trying to maintain order. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "You don't belong in command." Cale ignored her words. He approached the holographic display showing the enemy fleet. The ships were already bypassing some of the outer defenses, aiming directly at critical points in the citadel. Cale traced the patterns with his hand over the display. He did not need to understand the alien technology fully. His mind worked in patterns, predicting, calculating, adapting. "The outer shields will not hold," he said quietly. "We need to redirect energy to the central conduits, or the main reactor will be hit first." If that fails, he did not finish the sentence. The nobles understood. Catastrophe would follow. Lady Zyra stepped closer, skeptical but intrigued. "And why should we listen to you, human?" Cale held the blade in one hand and gestured with the other. "Because it chose me. And it will guide us to survive." There was no arrogance in his tone, no pride, only calm certainty. The energy from the relic seemed to reinforce his words, a silent signal that he was right. Reluctantly, Lady Zyra signaled the soldiers to follow Cale's instructions. They redirected energy from defensive shields to the central conduits as he had instructed. The blade pulsed with energy as if approving, sending a sense of focus and urgency to everyone nearby. The enemy ships advanced with precision, firing on the citadel relentlessly. Explosions rocked the walls, and some outer platforms were destroyed. Yet Cale remained steady. He guided soldiers to weak points, instructed repair teams on stabilizing damaged conduits, and used the blade to sense energy fluctuations in the citadel's structure. It was as if the weapon had become an extension of his mind, allowing him to perceive threats he could not normally see. Lady Zyra watched him in awe. She had always believed strength came from power, from training, from lineage. Yet here was a human, a creature she had considered weak, directing an entire defense without a single act of brute force. Every command Kale gave, every adjustment he made, turned potential disaster into survival. The soldiers began to trust him, even when they had never met him before. Hours passed and the battle raged on. The enemy fleet was relentless, attempting to find weak points, probing defenses, and striking wherever they could. Kale moved from station to station, helping wherever he could. He never raised his voice. He never demanded obedience. Instead, he guided, suggested, and corrected. The calmness he exuded spread to those around him. Panic subsided. Strategy replaced chaos. The Citadel's energy systems began stabilizing under his guidance. Shields held longer than expected. Critical points that were hit were repaired quickly. Soldiers who were about to retreat found themselves moving with renewed purpose. Even Lady Zyra, who had been skeptical and angry, found herself following his lead. She began to understand something she had never considered before. Leadership was not about showing strength, it was about inspiring it. Then, the blade pulsed brightly, almost urgently. Kale understood immediately. The enemy fleet had a hidden flagship cloaked until now, aiming directly for the core reactor. If it succeeded, the Citadel would collapse and countless lives would be lost. Time was short. Every second mattered. Kale moved to the central control platform, blade in hand. Lady Zyra followed, finally speaking with respect. "Tell me what to do," she said. Her tone was calm, almost deferential, though her pride still lingered beneath the surface. Kale nodded. He pointed to the holographic display. "We need to draw them into a trap, redirect energy from the central shields to the outer perimeter, then collapse it at the right moment. We cannot destroy them, but we can stop their advance long enough to evacuate and counterattack." The plan was risky. If any calculation was wrong, the Citadel would suffer massive damage. Yet Kale had a steady confidence, and the blade seemed to verify his instincts. He guided the soldiers as they made rapid adjustments. The energy flows shifted, lights dimmed and brightened, and the Citadel groaned under the strain. The enemy flagship struck. Energy beams tore through the outer defenses, but the trap Kale had devised held. The ship's momentum carried it forward, and suddenly the outer shields collapsed as intended. The flagship was trapped, caught in a web of redirected energy. The enemy fleet faltered, unable to support it. Confusion rippled through their ranks. Kale kept directing the defense. He moved like a conductor, each command precise, measured, and effective. The enemy fleet, once confident in their attack, began retreating. The Citadel had survived. The nobles cheered, but the sound felt hollow compared to the relief Kale felt. He did not celebrate. He only observed, ensuring that the Citadel was stable and that everyone had survived. Lady Zyra finally approached him, blade still in his hand. You saved us," she said, her voice quiet. "A human, you actually saved us." Her pride struggled with the truth, but she could not deny it. Kale nodded simply. "I only did what I could," he replied. "The Citadel belongs to everyone here, not just to those who claim power by birth." The room was still filled with awe, fear, and newfound respect. Soldiers who had doubted him now bowed their heads in acknowledgement. Nobles who had laughed moments ago now stared, unable to comprehend the reality. The blade pulsed gently in Kale's hands, as if approving of the calm, steady choice to protect rather than dominate. Even Lady Zyra, though still processing the shock, began to see the truth. Humans were underestimated, yes, but their endurance, their quiet intelligence, and their ability to act without arrogance made them more dangerous than any noble weapon or warrior she had ever encountered. The galaxy had shifted subtly, yet irreversibly, in that moment. The first wave of attack had ended. The Citadel had survived, yet Kale knew this was only the beginning. The enemy fleet had retreated, but they would return. More challenges were coming. More threats would test endurance, strategy, and courage. Kale was ready. Not because he was the strongest, but because he was human. And humans, he realized, could endure where others would falter. He lowered the blade, feeling its calm energy settle into his hands. He looked at Lady Zyra. "We need to prepare," he said. "They will come again. We have survived today, but tomorrow will be harder." She nodded, finally understanding what she had never realized before. Leadership, courage, and strength were not measured by birthright or brute force. They were measured by endurance, intelligence, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. The hall was quiet now, but the energy of the blade continued to hum softly. It had chosen its bearer, and in doing so it had chosen to change the way the Citadel, and perhaps the galaxy, would see humans forever. Kale did not revel in power. He only understood responsibility. And as he looked toward the future, he knew that endurance, courage, and the quiet strength of humanity would guide them through challenges no one else could face. The Citadel was quiet after the first wave of attack, but the calm was fragile. Every corner of the massive structure seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next strike. Kale walked through the corridors, the blade in his hand pulsing gently, a reminder of the responsibility he now carried. Soldiers and engineers glanced at him with a mixture of respect and disbelief. They had seen him guide the defense, steady and calm, and now they looked to him for every decision. Lady Zyra followed close behind, her steps careful. She had always been confident, trained to trust only herself and her strength. Yet after what she had witnessed, she could not deny the truth. Kale, a human, had outmaneuvered her plans without using force, without commanding with fear. His quiet decisions had saved lives and stabilized the Citadel. She still struggled with the pride in her chest, but she knew one thing: he had proven himself. Kale reached the command center again. The holographic display showed the enemy fleet retreating into the dark space beyond the Citadel's sensors. They were not defeated, only delayed. Kale studied the readings carefully. The enemy was calculating, precise, and relentless. Their next move would be stronger, more coordinated. The Citadel could not hold against them for long if defenses were not improved. "We cannot rely on chance," Kale said, his voice calm. "We need to strengthen every shield, repair every weak point, and prepare a countermeasure for their flagship. If we delay them again, they will return with even greater force." Lady Zyra nodded. "Then tell me what to do," she said. Her tone was no longer one of command or superiority. It was respect, tempered by understanding. "We will follow your guidance." Kale moved among the soldiers and engineers, inspecting each station. He observed how the energy flowed through the Citadel, noting weak points, inefficiencies, and areas vulnerable to attack. He instructed the engineers on how to stabilize the power conduits, how to reroute energy to critical defenses without overloading the system. The soldiers followed his guidance, practicing maneuvers and simulations to prepare for the next strike. Hours passed, and the enemy fleet remained just beyond the sensor range. The Citadel was tense, alive with anticipation. Kale felt the blade pulsing more strongly now, almost as if it sensed the enemy's intentions. It was guiding him subtly, providing insight into patterns and energy fluctuations. He did not understand how, but he trusted it. Its ancient energy complemented his instincts, sharpening his decisions. Suddenly, alarms rang out again. The enemy fleet had split, sending smaller attack units directly toward the Citadel's lower platforms. They were fast, agile, and designed to exploit gaps in defenses. Kale did not panic. He moved quickly to the nearest control station and began coordinating the response. "Divert shield energy to the outer platforms," he instructed. "Fire countermeasures to disrupt their speed. Focus on protecting the core, but don't waste energy on units we can trap." Soldiers moved swiftly, executing his orders. Kale's calm voice and steady guidance kept everyone focused, even as explosions rocked the outer hull. Lady Zyra stood beside him, observing the precision of his commands. She had fought countless battles, yet she had never seen strategy executed with such clarity and efficiency. Kale did not rely on brute strength or aggressive attacks. He relied on foresight, adaptability, and patience. That was the true power the blade had awakened in him. The first wave of attack units approached the Citadel. Kale guided the shields and countermeasures with a steady hand, predicting their movements. Some units were destroyed, while others were trapped in energy grids, unable to escape. The Citadel shuddered, but the defenses held. Kale moved to the next station, adjusting energy flows and reinforcing weak points in real time. Lady Zyra spoke quietly, almost to herself. "This is incredible. He is not just surviving, he is controlling the battlefield." She looked at the soldiers around them, and they trust him without hesitation. They believe in him even though he is human. Kale felt the blade's hum intensify, almost like encouragement. The energy of the relic was not for destruction alone. It guided, it enhanced perception, it amplified endurance. He realized that humans had always been underestimated because their strength was subtle. It was in endurance, in patience, in the ability to remain calm under pressure. That was something no weapon or armor could provide. As the battle continued, Kale noticed an anomaly on the sensors. A cloaked vessel, larger than the attack units, was approaching the core reactor. Its energy signature was immense, almost overwhelming. The enemy flagship was returning, cloaked and ready to strike. If it reached the reactor, the Citadel would face complete destruction. Kale turned to Lady Zyra. "We need to stop the flagship before it reaches the core," he said. "It is too powerful to face directly. We must use strategy, not force." Lady Zyra nodded, understanding immediately. "Then we will follow your lead. Tell us what to do." Kale moved quickly, devising a plan. He instructed the soldiers to create a layered trap using the Citadel's energy systems. Shields would be redirected, creating narrow corridors of force that would guide the flagship into a confined area. Energy grids would trap it, preventing escape. At the same time, repair teams reinforced critical structures, ensuring that even if part of the Citadel was damaged, the core would remain intact. The plan was complex, but Kale executed it with precision. The soldiers moved efficiently, trusting his guidance. Lady Zyra coordinated with him, adjusting troop positions and monitoring the execution. The cloaked flagship drew nearer, unaware of the trap waiting for it. Finally, the vessel entered the designated area. Kale signaled the activation of the energy grids. Beams of light shot across the corridor, trapping the flagship. Its movements became restricted, and the ship could no longer advance toward the core. The enemy fleet's smaller units were confused, unable to support their flagship effectively. Kale remained calm, guiding every move. He directed soldiers to focus countermeasures on the trapped ship while maintaining defenses for the rest of the Citadel. The enemy fleet began to retreat, unable to overcome the strategy Kale had implemented. The Citadel had survived another attack, thanks to the combination of his guidance and the relic blade's subtle influence. Lady Zyra approached him once more, her expression a mixture of awe and humility. "I have never seen anything like this," she said quietly. "A human guiding the defense of the Citadel with nothing but strategy and calm determination. You have proven something no noble warrior has ever shown." Kale lowered the blade slightly, feeling its hum subside to a gentle pulse. "I only did what needed to be done," he replied. "The Citadel is not about one person. It belongs to everyone who protects it." The soldiers around them nodded, some bowing slightly in respect. The nobles, though hesitant, began to recognize the truth. Strength was not always measured by power or lineage. It was measured by endurance, intelligence, and the ability to act when it mattered most. As the immediate threat passed, Kale took a moment to assess the damage. Several outer platforms had been destroyed, but the core and critical systems were intact. Repair teams were already at work, guided by his instructions. The Citadel's defenses were stronger now, not just because of repairs, but because everyone had learned to trust his decisions and act with purpose. Lady Zyra remained close, observing quietly. She had been trained to believe that humans were fragile, weak, and unfit for leadership. Yet here was Kale, calm, intelligent, and capable of guiding an entire Citadel through a battle that could have destroyed them all. Her perspective was changing. She understood now that strength was not only in muscle or lineage, but in endurance, strategy, and the courage to act when others hesitated. Kale felt the weight of responsibility settle more heavily on his shoulders. The enemy fleet would return, stronger and more determined. But he also felt a quiet confidence. The blade had chosen him, not for conquest or power, but to guide and protect. He understood now that humans had a different kind of strength, one that could endure, adapt, and inspire others even in the darkest moments. As night fell over the gas giant below, the Citadel hummed with quiet activity. Soldiers repaired weapons, engineers stabilized energy conduits, and nobles began to reconsider their assumptions about humans. Kale walked through the corridors, the blade pulsing softly in his hands. He did not seek recognition or glory. He only sought to protect, to guide, and to endure. Lady Zyra followed, her steps measured. She had been humbled, and yet she felt a growing respect for the human beside her. The blade had chosen wisely, she realized. The future of the Citadel, and perhaps the galaxy, depended not on pride or power, but on the quiet strength of those willing to act when it mattered most. Kale paused at a window overlooking the gas giant below. Its swirling colors reflected in the metal walls, beautiful and untouchable. He felt a sense of calm determination. The enemy would return, challenges would arise, and the path ahead would be difficult. But he knew that endurance, intelligence, and courage would guide them. Humans had survived against impossible odds before, and they would do so again. The relic blade pulsed gently, as if affirming his thoughts. Kale held it steady, ready for whatever would come next. The first wave had been survived. The second wave had been countered. And yet, he knew, the true test was only beginning. The Citadel, for the first time, understood that the humans among them were not weak. They were patient, resilient, and capable of guiding the strongest warriors and nobility through challenges that seemed insurmountable. And Kale, the quiet human laborer, was at the center of it all, holding the relic blade with calm determination, ready to face whatever the galaxy would throw at them next. The Citadel had survived the initial attacks, but Kale knew that the enemy would not give up. From the moment he had held the relic blade, he had sensed a purpose greater than defense. This was a test, a challenge to see whether humans could endure under pressure and inspire others to follow. Now, as the hours passed and repairs continued, he felt a familiar tension in the air. The enemy fleet had retreated, but not for long. Their silence was not surrender. It was planning, regrouping, and preparing a more precise strike. Kale walked through the corridors, blade in hand, observing the repair teams. Soldiers, engineers, and even some of the lower-ranking nobles worked tirelessly to restore damaged systems. He gave clear, calm instructions, moving from station to station. Each order was precise and measured, designed to maximize efficiency without causing panic. Despite their fear, the people around him trusted him. They moved with purpose, inspired by his calm authority. Lady Zyra followed closely, her expression a mixture of respect and curiosity. She had spent her life believing strength came from bloodline, training, and reputation. Yet here was a human, small and unassuming, who had guided the Citadel through attacks that would have destroyed entire fleets. She could not deny it anymore. Humans possessed a type of strength that was subtle, quiet, and often underestimated. The sensors blinked suddenly, a warning flashing across the command center's display. Kale moved quickly to analyze the data. The enemy fleet was returning, but this time their approach was more coordinated. The flagship led the advance, cloaked and heavily shielded, while smaller vessels flanked it on all sides. The fleet had learned from their earlier failure. They were faster, more precise, and more dangerous. Kale's mind raced as he considered the options. A direct assault would be suicidal. Any attempt to confront the flagship head-on would result in massive casualties. The Citadel could not withstand such power. But there was another way: strategy, patience, and precise timing. The relic blade pulsed in his hand, almost as if it approved his thought process. It had guided him before, and now it was guiding him again. He turned to Lady Zyra, who stood beside him, her usual confidence tempered by concern. "We cannot fight them directly," he said calmly. "We need to use their strength against them. We must draw them into a controlled zone and trap them just like before, but this time it will require precision, timing, and coordination. One mistake could destroy the Citadel." Lady Zyra nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Then tell us what to do," she said. Her tone was no longer commanding. It was respectful, acknowledging Kale's insight and leadership. "We will follow your guidance completely." Kale moved swiftly, issuing instructions to the soldiers and engineers. Shield generators were adjusted, energy conduits rerouted, and auxiliary platforms prepared as bait for the enemy fleet. The plan was complex, but Kale guided each step carefully, ensuring that every soldier and engineer knew their role. The relic blade pulsed steadily, a silent reassurance that his instincts were correct. As the enemy fleet approached, Kale observed their formation. The flagship led with precise movements, cloaked but detectable through subtle energy signatures. The smaller vessels followed, scanning for weaknesses. Kale anticipated their path, predicting where they would strike and how they would react to defensive measures. He issued commands with calm authority, directing shields, energy fields, and countermeasures in perfect synchronization. The first wave of smaller vessels entered the prepared zone. Energy grids activated, trapping some units while others were deflected away. The Citadel shuddered under the strain, but the defenses held. Kale moved from station to station, adjusting energy flows, reinforcing weak points, and ensuring the trap worked as intended. The soldiers followed his lead without hesitation, their trust in him unwavering. Lady Zyra watched him closely. She had faced countless battles, fought warriors from distant planets, and commanded elite squads. Yet she had never seen leadership executed with such clarity and effectiveness. Kale did not rely on aggression or intimidation. He relied on foresight, adaptability, and calm judgment. That was the true power the relic blade had awakened in him, a power not measured by strength, but by understanding, patience, and endurance. The flagship finally entered the controlled zone, its shields flickering as it adjusted to the energy fields surrounding it. Kale issued precise instructions to the soldiers: focus energy bursts on specific points, guide the vessel into the trap, and maintain the shields around the core. The smaller vessels tried to escape, but the energy grids closed around them, immobilizing their movements. Chaos erupted in the enemy fleet as their strategy began to unravel. Kale remained calm, guiding every action. The Citadel responded to his commands with remarkable precision. Energy flowed where it was needed, shields strengthened weak points, and repair teams worked tirelessly to maintain critical systems. The enemy flagship struggled, trapped within the carefully prepared zone. Its energy signature pulsed, but it could not break free. Kale adjusted the flow of energy once more, tightening the trap and ensuring that the Citadel remained safe. Suddenly, the flagship released a pulse of energy, attempting to disrupt the defenses. Alarms rang throughout the Citadel, and sparks flew from damaged conduits. Kale reacted instantly, redirecting energy to compensate, guiding repair teams to stabilize the system. The pulse was powerful, but it was no match for the combined strategy of Kale, the soldiers, and the relic blade. The flagship remained trapped, unable to advance. Lady Zyra stepped closer, her voice filled with awe. "You are extraordinary," she said quietly. "A human guiding this defense, controlling every movement, saving lives without striking a single blow. I never thought such a thing was possible." Kale shook his head, holding the blade firmly. "It is not about being extraordinary," he said. "It is about endurance, observation, and action. Strength is not always in force. Sometimes it is in patience, in calculation, in knowing the right moment to act." The smaller enemy vessels began to retreat, their formation broken, their strategy foiled. The flagship, still trapped, struggled to escape, but the energy grids held firm. Kale issued instructions to focus targeted pulses to weaken the vessel's energy field further. Slowly, with careful precision, the flagship's shields began to falter. It was trapped completely, unable to move or defend itself effectively. Soldiers cheered quietly, careful not to disrupt the delicate balance of energy flows. Engineers worked quickly, reinforcing critical systems and ensuring the Citadel's stability. Kale moved among them, providing guidance, encouragement, and calm reassurance. Every action he took was measured, precise, and purposeful. The flagship emitted a final pulse of energy, a desperate attempt to break free. Sparks flew, alarms rang louder, and the Citadel shook. Yet Kale remained steady. He focused, guiding every energy flow, every shield adjustment, and every repair. The vessel's attempts failed. The trap held. The Citadel had survived again, stronger and more secure than before. Lady Zyra approached him once more, her expression a mixture of respect and humility. "You have changed everything," she said. "I have seen power, skill, and strength, but this is different. You lead without fear, without arrogance, and yet you inspire more than anyone I have ever known." Kale lowered the blade slightly, feeling its gentle pulse. "I do what must be done," he said simply. "The Citadel belongs to everyone who protects it. Strength is not measured by power alone, but by endurance, intelligence, and the willingness to act when it matters most." The soldiers nodded, some bowing slightly in acknowledgement. The nobles, though hesitant, began to recognize the truth. Humans were not weak. They possessed a quiet strength that could endure, adapt, and guide others through challenges that seemed impossible. Kale had demonstrated that strength was not always in force or lineage, but in understanding, patience, and action. As the immediate threat passed, Kale assessed the situation. The Citadel had sustained damage, but the core and critical systems were intact. Repair teams continued to work under his guidance, stabilizing energy conduits, reinforcing platforms, and preparing for the next possible attack. The Citadel was not just surviving, it was adapting, growing stronger under his leadership. Lady Zyra stood beside him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of awe and contemplation. She had spent her life believing humans were fragile and unfit for leadership. Yet here was a human who had guided the Citadel through attacks that would have destroyed the strongest warriors. She understood now that strength was subtle, quiet, and often overlooked. It was in endurance, intelligence, and the ability to act decisively when others hesitated. Kale felt the weight of responsibility settle more heavily on his shoulders. The enemy fleet would return stronger and more determined, but he also felt a quiet confidence. The relic blade had chosen him, not for glory or power, but to guide, protect, and endure. He understood now that humans had a unique strength, one that could inspire others, endure hardships, and prevail where others would fail. The Citadel continued its quiet hum, alive with activity. Soldiers repaired weapons, engineers stabilized systems, and nobles began to reconsider their assumptions about humans. Kale walked through the corridors, the blade pulsing softly in his hands. He did not seek recognition or authority. He sought only to protect, to guide, and to endure. As night fell over the gas giant below, Kale stood at a window overlooking the swirling colors of the planet. The enemy fleet had been delayed, but he knew this was only the beginning. The true challenge lay ahead. More waves would come, more enemies would test the Citadel, and Kale would be ready. Not because he was the strongest, but because he understood endurance, strategy, and calm leadership. Lady Zyra approached him, placing a hand lightly on his shoulder. "You have taught me something I never expected," she said. "Humans are not weak. They endure, they inspire, and they lead in ways I could not imagine. I will follow your guidance, not because I have to, but because I trust your judgment." Kale nodded, holding the blade firmly. "Then we will prepare," he said. "We have survived today, but tomorrow will be harder. We must remain vigilant, act wisely, and endure. That is how we will protect the Citadel and perhaps even change the way the galaxy sees humans." The relic blade pulsed gently, as if acknowledging his words. It had chosen its bearer wisely, and through him it had revealed a truth long ignored by the galaxy. Humans were not weak. They were patient, intelligent, resilient, and capable of guiding others through challenges that seemed impossible. Kale looked out at the stars beyond the Citadel, the gas giant casting a soft glow over the walls. He knew the enemy would return, more dangerous than before. Yet he felt no fear. He held the relic blade, he had the trust of the soldiers and nobles, and he understood the true strength of humanity. The future of the Citadel and perhaps the galaxy rested not in power alone, but in endurance, strategy, and quiet courage. The Citadel was quiet in the early hours, but the calm felt fragile. Kale stood in the command center, the relic blade pulsing gently in his hands, sensing the energy of the structure around him. Soldiers and engineers worked tirelessly, repairing damage and reinforcing defenses after the previous attacks. Lady Zyra moved among them, coordinating efforts with Kale's guidance. Though her pride remained, she had come to respect the human at her side. His calm authority had proven stronger than any noble title or warrior training. Kale studied the sensors carefully. The enemy fleet had disappeared beyond the edge of detection, but he knew they were preparing for a final strike. Every instinct, every moment of observation told him that the next attack would be their strongest. They had learned from their failures, adapted, and would return with precision. The Citadel had survived before, but now the stakes were higher. Failure would mean total destruction. He walked through the corridors, blade in hand, observing the soldiers and engineers. Every movement, every adjustment, every decision he made was measured. The relic blade hummed softly, providing subtle guidance and focus. It was more than a weapon, it was a link, a source of insight that amplified his perception and patience. Humans had always endured against odds, often underestimated because their strength was quiet and internal. Now that strength had become a beacon for the Citadel. Lady Zyra joined him near the central command platform. "Do you truly believe we can withstand the final wave?" she asked, her voice low but steady. She had witnessed Kale's calm in the midst of chaos before, but this was different. This time, the enemy was stronger, and the Citadel's endurance would be tested to its limits. Kale nodded, never wavering. "We can," he said simply. "Not because we are the strongest, but because we are prepared, adaptable, and united. The enemy underestimates us. They do not see what humans can endure, what they can inspire, or how they can act when it matters most. This is our strength." The first alerts of the incoming fleet appeared on the sensors. It was massive, A combination of fast attack units, heavy cruisers, and the flagship, larger and more heavily armed than before. The fleet moved with perfect coordination, aiming to overwhelm every defense. Explosions from previous skirmishes had left the citadel damaged, but Kale's instructions had ensured that the core systems were intact. Now every strategy, every calculation, and every instinct would be tested. Kale moved swiftly, issuing instructions with calm precision. Shields were adjusted, energy conduits reinforced, and defensive grids prepared. Soldiers moved with efficiency and confidence, trusting his guidance completely. The citadel responded like a living organism, every system working in harmony under his direction. The relic blade pulsed in his hands, as if amplifying his focus, sensing weak points and guiding him to the most critical decisions. The enemy fleet approached, and the first wave of attack units struck immediately. Energy beams tore across the outer platforms, and explosions shook the citadel. Yet Kale's strategies were precise. Shields absorbed the energy, while countermeasures disrupted the enemy formations. Some units were destroyed, while others were trapped within energy grids, unable to maneuver. Every movement of the fleet was anticipated, every weakness exploited. Lady Zyra watched, her eyes wide with admiration. "I have never seen anything like this," she whispered. "You command without force, and yet the citadel obeys. You inspire without words, and yet soldiers act with purpose. This is a kind of strength I did not believe existed." Kale focused, his mind working quickly. The flagship moved closer, its energy signature growing stronger and more dangerous. He directed energy pulses to guide the vessel into a trap, adjusting shields and grids with precise timing. Smaller enemy units attempted to flank the citadel, but Kale anticipated every maneuver. The soldiers followed his guidance without hesitation, executing every instruction with perfect coordination. Explosions erupted as the flagship entered the controlled zone. The energy grids trapped it, slowing its advance. Kale adjusted the flows of power, reinforcing weak points and maintaining stability. The citadel groaned under the strain, but every system held. The fleet's smaller vessels were neutralized or forced to retreat, their formations broken. The flagship struggled within the trap, unable to reach the core. Suddenly, the flagship released a massive pulse of energy, attempting to overwhelm the citadel's defenses. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and sections of the outer platforms collapsed. Engineers worked frantically under Kale's calm guidance, redirecting energy and repairing critical systems in real time. The pulse was powerful, but it was no match for the combination of strategy, preparation, and endurance. Kale's focus never wavered. Every decision, every adjustment, every instruction was calculated. The Citadel's energy systems responded perfectly, countering the enemy's attack. Slowly, the flagship's shields faltered under precise energy bursts directed by Kale's commands. The vessel was trapped completely, its movements restricted, unable to advance or defend effectively. Soldiers cheered quietly, careful not to disrupt the delicate balance of energy flows. Engineers worked tirelessly, ensuring stability. The Citadel was alive, a coordinated force of humans and technology moving as one. The relic blade pulsed gently in Kale's hands, a silent acknowledgement that his guidance was correct. Lady Zyra approached him, her voice filled with awe. "You have done what no one else could," she said. "A human has guided the Citadel to survive, to endure, and to triumph against impossible odds. I never imagined such a thing was possible." Kale lowered the blade slightly. "It was not about doing the impossible," he replied calmly. "It was about enduring, observing, and acting when it mattered most. Strength is not always in force or lineage. It is in patience, understanding, and the willingness to do what is necessary to protect others." The flagship's final pulse of energy failed. The vessel was completely immobilized, trapped within the energy grids and unable to escape. Its retreating fleet had no choice but to fall back, defeated. The Citadel had survived the ultimate test. Soldiers and engineers gathered, exhausted but proud. Nobles who had once doubted Kale's worth now bowed their heads in recognition. Lady Zyra looked at him, her eyes reflecting both respect and newfound understanding. "Humans are not weak," she said. "They endure, they inspire, and they lead in ways that I never expected. You have shown us that strength is measured not by power alone, but by intelligence, patience, and courage." Kale nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle but not burden him. The citadel was safe for now. He knew the enemy would return again, as they always did, but he also knew that humanity's strength lay not in overwhelming power, but in endurance, strategy, and the ability to act when it mattered most. The relic blade pulsed gently, a quiet affirmation of his thoughts. It had chosen its bearer wisely, guiding him not for conquest, but for protection and guidance. Humans had endured against impossible odds before, and now, through Kale, they had shown that they could inspire, endure, and prevail even when all seemed lost. Kale walked through the citadel, observing the repairs and adjustments. Soldiers moved efficiently, engineers coordinated perfectly, and even the nobles began to respect and follow his guidance. The citadel had become a testament to human endurance and intelligence. It was not just a fortress, it was a symbol of what could be achieved when humans were underestimated and yet allowed to act with purpose. Lady Zyra approached him once more. "You have changed the way we see humans forever," she said. "Your leadership, your calm, your endurance, it has inspired everyone here. We owe our survival to you." Kale shook his head. "It is not about me," he said softly. "It is about all of us working together, trusting one another, and acting when it matters. The citadel survives because we endured, because we adapted, because we had courage. That is the strength of humanity." The stars outside the citadel's viewports shimmered against the darkness of space. The gas giant below reflected a soft glow, casting light across the walls. Kale stood quietly, blade in hand, feeling a sense of calm accomplishment. The enemy had been repelled, the citadel had survived, and humanity's strength had been proven. For the first time, he allowed himself a small moment of relief. Not pride, not arrogance, but quiet acknowledgement of what had been accomplished. Humans had endured, they had inspired, they had led when others faltered, and Kale had been the instrument through which that strength was revealed. Lady Zyra stood beside him, her expression thoughtful. She had learned a lesson she would never forget. Humans were not to be underestimated. They endured hardships, inspired others, and acted decisively when it mattered most. Kale had shown her the truth that power was not measured in titles, weapons, or brute strength. It was measured in endurance, intelligence, and courage. The relic blade pulsed softly in Kale's hands, a reminder of the journey he had taken, the challenges he had faced, and the strength humanity had shown. He knew that future challenges would come, as they always did. But he also knew that the citadel, guided by human endurance and intelligence, would endure. They would survive. They would thrive. And humanity's true strength, often underestimated, would continue to shine through even in the darkest moments. As the citadel prepared for the quiet after the storm, Kale and Lady Zyra stood together, watching the stars. The battle was over for now. The citadel was safe. And humanity had proven that even the smallest, most underestimated individuals could change the fate of entire civilizations. Kale lowered the blade, feeling its calm energy settle. He understood now what it truly meant to lead, not through fear or force, but through endurance, wisdom, and courage. The citadel had survived, the enemy defeated, and humanity's strength had been revealed for all to see. And as he looked toward the future, Kale knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy would test them again. The challenges would grow. But humans had proven that they could endure, inspire, and lead against impossible odds. And Kale, the human chosen by the relic blade, would be ready for whatever came next. The stars shimmered, the citadel hummed, and humanity endured.